pick this book up, we'll do our vocabulary list from Metzger's Lexical Aids. There's a joke there someplace, I'm sure. But you'll see according to the syllabus what we'll do. All right, so tonight we will go over the syllabus, and then we will go over a few pages of our text, and then we will look at Mark chapter 1, and that's all according to the schedule in the syllabus. My phone number, that's my cell number there, and my email is on the syllabus should you need it. Don't hesitate to call. If there's anything you need or any questions you have. I expect we'll have a shorter class tonight. We normally go from 6 to 10-ish, right? And we have a break in the middle someplace. Kaiser's cool. I've never been to Kaiser. We got stuff around here. I passed a Starbucks not too far away. So it ought to be good. All right, so let's just go through the syllabus quickly. Course description just comes out of the catalog, and you can see that. It's fairly straightforward. The course objectives: the successful student will continue developing his or her grasp of elementary Greek grammar and be able to translate from the book of Mark. The successful student will become familiar with the scope and concepts of Greek syntax and be able to apply this knowledge to the translation of the New Testament. Number 3, the successful student will continue the process of memorizing Greek forms and will be required to memorize basic vocabulary. The successful student will learn a method and process of diagramming Greek sentences. The successful student will value the use of the Greek New Testament in practical ministry. Now, I'm correct in thinking that we have 10 weeks, right? Is that not what we have? 10 weeks. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so our texts are the same New Testament that we used for the beginning class, which is a Reader's Greek New Testament. It's good if you have that. If you have a different, like a UBS text or whatever, that's fine. But you'll have to find the page number yourself if you have a different biblical text. By now you shouldn't have trouble with that. Then Wallace, of course, which I think most of you or all of you have. That would be our syntactical grammar. And then we talked about Metzger's Lexical Aids. That's a good book to have. We'll not cover all of it in class, but it's a good thing to look through on your own for a resource. It is recommended that you have a couple of lexica. I saw that shorter, there it is, that shorter lexicon right there. That's a good one to have for translation. The New Testament that you have gives you a lot of vocabulary, down at the bottom of it, so that's very helpful. But just for translation work, if you're trying to use a huge lexicon, that gets pretty old, spending 5 minutes to look up each word. So if you have that shorter lexicon right there, that's of great use. It's also of great use to get the big version of that, and there's a relatively new edition of that. So grab that as soon as money permits, because it is really an indispensable exegetical tool. As it turns out, I got the latest version on my computer. I may have to break down and buy it in book form as well. That's an important lexicon for you to have in terms of doing exegesis. We showed you this and used it. I used it, at least I think some of you got this, the grammatical analysis of the Greek New Testament. That's a very, very useful tool. It goes verse by verse through the New Testament. And it gives you vocabulary, it gives you grammar, it gives you parsing of things you probably won't know from beginning Greek. It makes a basic assumption that you have your beginning Greek stuff down pretty well. And when you get beyond that, then it starts helping you. Right? And that's what I like about it. Every tool you use is a crutch, you might say. We've talked about this before. Even a lexicon is a crutch. Certainly the vocabulary at the bottom of each page of your New Testament is a crutch. And the key to using tools, you probably never will get to the point where you're not using a lexicon as a crutch, at least from time to time. You want the tools that you use, you want the crutches you use to be crutches that help you get better, not crutches that keep you from getting better. So at certain points of your effort of learning the language, different tools are appropriate for you. So you may come to a certain place where you find that this New Testament is no longer helping you move forward in your Greek learning ability, but is hampering that even, right? So you may choose to get a regular Greek text where at the bottom of the page, instead of having vocabulary helps, you have text critical concerns, right? So hopefully at some point you will graduate to a regular Greek New Testament. And you may grab this and take it to Starbucks on occasion for the rest of your life, and just have the vocabulary there and it's useful. This is a tool that, since it assumes a basic knowledge of Greek, you'll probably be able to use it for a long time without it being a harmful crutch to you. In my opinion, at no time is it a good crutch to use an analytical dictionary, or you can just look anything up. Now, if you get stuck with something, a really, really hard word or something like that, you get stuck with it. But if you make a habit of using an analytical dictionary, if you don't know what that is, analytical lexicon, if you don't know what that is, you're all the better for it, probably. Or an interlinear or something like that. I mean, I have an interlinear on my shelf. As I remember, it comes from back before I ever took Greek, I think. But, there's just no reason to pull it down. That kind of thing is just not going to help you. Right? So those are the texts, and I also would strongly suggest that you get that box of 1,000 Greek vocabulary cards. You can get those, I believe, at Amazon.com. You can get those for various languages. You can get them for Greek, you can get them for Hebrew, and those are a good thing. In fact, there they are, right there, or at least cards like those.
It's part of it. We only study part of the box.
Yeah, okay, so you know what they look like? That's what they look like right there. And they're very useful. They come in alphabetical order, and you get 1,000 vocabulary words on these cards. The vocabulary word is on one side and the English meaning's on the other side. And it's so useful because, number one, you can drill yourself with them, because the answer is not there, but it is on the back when you need it. The other thing is you can shuffle them and put them in different order, because sometimes when you're learning vocabulary, you end up learning in context and depending on the order that you have them. Like if you write them on a page or you look at them on the page of a book, the order helps you, right? Well, when you get to a test or a quiz or in the Bible, that order is not there, and so you really haven't learned them sufficiently. Another way that those things help is that you can use them to sort through the words that you know and the words that you need to work on. So if you can discipline yourself to go back through all the cards you've covered, every so often, and if you miss one, pull it out, put it in a different pile until you've drilled that into your mind, and you can put it into the pile that you know, and you can have a pile that you know cold, a pile that you know pretty well, a pile that you're working on, or however you want to organize it, and you can try to move them from this pile to that pile, and it's very, very useful. They're convenient to take with you. You can have some in your pocket or whatever. I always found it useful to use a hole punch a hole in them, and get one of those old paper boy rings. And, you know, you can use that, and then you can sit there with them, and you just flip them on the ring. You do have to take them off and shuffle them once in a while just so you can be helped by the order. They're not that expensive. You can also find a box of blank cards so that you can make your own, but you probably won't need that. I think a few blank ones come in the box of 1,000 anyway. When we do vocabulary, we're simply, for obvious reasons, I think, because it's most helpful, going to start with the words that are used most frequently. I wish we could get down to 10 times so that you knew every word that's used 10 times or more in the New Testament. We just don't have the ability, I don't think, to do that in 10 weeks. So we're not going to get down to 10. I think we get down to 24 times or something like that. But you can imagine how useful that is. And you can also imagine that for the first couple of weeks, you're already going to know most of those because the beginning Greek vocabulary would have concentrated more on words that are used more, hopefully, I think it did. And in your reading over the summer, you will have learned some vocabulary, and on average, you would have obviously confronted words that occur more often, probably, right? So the first couple of weeks of this will be more like a review than anything else, and then we'll get down to business of learning the vocabulary. So hopefully you know the forms, but you're going to be working those in. You know the basic grammar pretty well, still going to be learning and working that in. If you know the vocabulary, then you're off and running at this point. So vocabulary becomes fairly critical. You want to get to the point where you're not struggling so much with reading the text that it's too much of a pain for you to use it in ministry. Hopefully, you could get to the place where it saves you time rather than costs you time. And then you will use it in ministry. If you're not struggling with reading the text so much, you can put together sermons and Bible studies that are solid far quicker and come up with a better result than reading through a goblet of commentaries all the time. Right? Commentaries are great, don't misunderstand me, but you're far better off developing your stuff from the text. You know, you can make a living, seriously, you can make a living just letting people know what you can see in your Greek Bible that they can't see in their English Bible. Now that's a little bit of an exaggeration. I guess it depends on what your job is. If you're a professor, that's a little easier. You got to do a little visiting once in a while as a pastor. But I mean, you know, that's bread and butter right there. You know, if you can read the text, you'll know right away. Here's what I can see in this text, and here's what I know because I know my English Bible. You know, I can read that too, and you can see what you can't see, right? Well, it doesn't take very long, you know, to fill up 20 minutes of what you can't see, but you can see in the Greek text, right? And so that's bread and butter. So you don't have to go searching for what other people think as the foundation for what you're doing in preaching and teaching and those sorts of things. So those vocabulary cards, you know, get online, get those babies because those will help you tremendously. There may be a bookstore in town where you can get them. I don't know. I don't know in Salem or not. I don't know if you have that kind of a bookstore.
You probably order it from the Christian bookstore.
Yeah. But probably the cheapest and easiest way to do it is just Amazon.com. And I believe I've had students order from that source before. And away you go. They're in alphabetical order, so, you know, the biggest job is going through here and, okay, anthropos, you got to look that up. So you're flipping through the cards there, you get to anthropos. They're in alphabetical order, so it's not that big a deal. But, you know, that's a moment for learning the vocabulary too, you know, and going through that process. So that's what I would strongly suggest that we do. Okay, course opportunities. We are going to translate. So the student will translate passages from the Greek New Testament according to the schedule, which we'll go over in a moment. The first 20 verses assigned should be treated in detail for translation and parsing, and the rest of the text assigned for that evening should be covered for familiarity. So, in other words, what we're going to do, just to take a preview of the schedule, is to work through or assign at least one chapter of the book of Mark for each time we get together. Now we have to remember that when we get together, that's a week's worth of class, right? So we're going to assign one chapter of the book of Mark, and some of those can be pretty long. I'm thinking that the first chapter got up into the 40s at least in verses, or so. But what I want you to do is I want you to know the first 20 verses cold, okay? And so that's what you're going to be graded on primarily, is those first 20 verses. To be able to give me a good translation, you know how we do in class, you know, the kind of translation that lets me know that you know what's there in Greek. It may not be, you know, the most polished English in the world, but, you know, we don't want it to be too rough, right? And be able to parse any of the verbals and deal with that. Then we can have discussions of syntactical issues. But I also want you to get through the whole thing, even though you don't come to class necessarily ready to take a quiz and give me a good translation and parsing of anything with the first 20 verses. I want you to be able to work with and discuss the rest of the chapter as well. So, you know, if I see that you're, you know, only reading the first 20 verses and that's it, you know, then we'll probably, you know, find ways of allowing that to reflect on your grade, right? But if you are, you know, ready to rock and roll, can you say that in seminary? If you're really ready to go on the first 20 verses, right, and familiar with the rest of it, then we'll be good to go. I just don't want to kill you by, you know, saying, you know, take 40 or 50 verses on a night and be ready just to, you know, jam on all of it, right?
So you're not asking us to turn anything handwritten?
No. Well, no. It'll just be quiz time when you come. I'll do it maybe various ways. I might say, take out a piece of paper and, you know, translate verse 5 and parse all the verbals in verse 7 or something like that. Or I might say, okay, we're going to start with Joe tonight. Joe's going to read whatever verse for us, and you're going to read it, and, you know, according to your ease and accuracy of reading, I'll mark down a grade, and I might say, okay, Joe, parse whatever for us. And so, you know, that becomes a little bit more subjective for me, but, you know, I mark down a grade at that point by your interaction as you read and parse. So those are the two ways we might quiz over the translation part. Now, you know, how you prepare for that, do I suggest that you write out, you know, for yourself the translation? Absolutely. Does anyone here not have the text of the New Testament on computer? Okay, maybe someone can help you. The thing that I suggest to do, and what I have found is very useful, even though my Gramcord program will give me a whole exegetical chart with every word on the left-hand column and in categories, you know, that would be kind of interesting to do as well. But what's very workable, which you can do very readily on the computer, is just print out these chapters from the book of Mark, one word per line, about space and a half, right? And you can probably use 2 columns per page. So you've got one column with one word on each line, maybe spaced a little bit more. Next to it, another column. You can get away with having 2 columns per page, probably. So that next to each word that you need to write something, you can. Now, you're probably not going to write anything, right? But if there's a vocabulary word, you can write the meaning of it. If there is a verbal to be parsed, you can write down the parsing of it. And that's very, very useful. And if you leave a little space at the bottom of that page, you can also write a translation of those words that occur on that page. How would you do that? Well, you just, you know, you have the text in front of you and you just choose it and tell the computer to exchange every space for a paragraph marker, right, for an end-of-line marker, paragraph mark, right? And so the computer then will automatically do that. The document gets kind of long, so that's why you do 2 columns. Then you just say, okay, make this 2 columns, make it space and a half. Maybe, if you want to put a translation at the bottom, maybe zip your margin up on the bottom a little bit, and you can get fancy in the footer there and write translation, right there. So that's a very effective way of making your own sort of study sheet. I've used that with beginning Greek students in 1 John in the past, and that's pretty effective too. So, that can help you. If you have a computer program, Bible search program or something like that, it may have something that you can use to print something out on a page. But you definitely want to write out a translation, and you definitely want to take notes on your parsing of things. Because if you don't remember something when you go back, I'm sure you're going to have to go over that passage, those first 20 verses, more than once, right? And it'll save you a lot of time if you forget something to not have to start from scratch and trying to figure out how to parse something. So you'll want to be taking some notes. So figure out a way of doing that. If you struggle with that, let me know. I could bring my computer and show you what my Grand Court program will produce, and we could work out something that I've not used it like that on paper. But if you're a person who really wants to take extensive notes, in fact, there's a place where if you've looked at your book at all, you'll know there's going to be umpteen uses of each case, for example. And so there's a place in there where you can write down what you think the use of that case is and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe I should look at that. Maybe we can even use that more for the course. It might be kind of interesting. Any question so far? Okay, so number 2, quizzes. Quizzes will cover the reading from Wallace, vocabulary, and principal parts as assigned on the course schedule. So I might ask you something about Wallace, just to see that you spent some time in the text. I'll tend to do that if I think you're not. Right? If I think you're not spending time in the text, then that's what you're going to expect to get quizzed. If I can see that you're spending time in the text, then that's probably not necessary. But what you can expect most nights is a vocabulary quiz. And there are various ways to do that. I could, verbally do it. I could write on a whiteboard. I could hand you a sheet of paper with 10 or 20 vocabulary words on it for you to write to English meaning. Now, we'll always be going from Greek to English. I'm not going to give you an English word and ask you to give me the Greek word. We'll always be going from Greek to English. And when we get a certain distance, there'll be a few principal parts so that you're able to get the gist of how that all works. Really, ideally, we should be learning more principal parts probably. Maybe in the future we will. Now, most of you are in that Greek reading class, if not all of you, right, over the summer. Was anybody not in that Greek reading class over the summer? Did you learn any vocabulary formally? Did you have vocabulary lists to learn?
I was spoke same book.
Same book.
That's true.
Well, that's cool. I wish I would have called him and known that.
What do we do there? I can't hear what they're saying.
All right. Yeah, that you learned vocabulary out of here. Okay, talk to me about that then.
I think he took us up to 30 occurrences.
So you've already learned up to 30 occurrences.
Theoretically, yeah.
You're right.
We didn't start. We started like at about 46 to 49. And we're down to 30. About 30. So we just did a...
That's brilliant then. I'm really glad, because I was going to say I would suggest that that class start in on the vocabulary and do half of it, and this class do the other half of it. Well, you've virtually done that. So that's awesome. We might be able to get to 10. Which, I mean, you can imagine if you have... Are you going to remember, a year from now, are you going to remember every one of those words that you've learned down to 10 times, which is, I think, a little over 1,000 words or something? Now, there are going to be some of you are going to forget, but you at least have a familiarity. And if you had at least a familiarity with everything used 10 times or more in the New Testament, and you still know 75% of those, you can imagine how much that's going to help you in reading your New Testament. That's going to be huge. And then you'll know that if you don't know a word, it's in here. You know, you can see it in here. And I think I showed you before how you can, if you're clever enough, you can make two-sided copies. I'm not that clever, and so it's been a very big challenge for me. But you can make two-sided copies of this book, from this book, you know, and cut them on a paper cutter or whatever. And if you're studying the book of Mark, here I have 2nd John and 3rd John. But if you're studying the book of Mark or whatever, you can have this with you. And now, with the New Testament and this, you have everything you need to translate. So you can pop off to wherever, Starbucks or whatever, have nothing but this and something tucked in here. And you know that you're going to be able to translate the whole thing. You're basically not going to get stuck. And the great thing about this is even the smaller UBS text that you'll get one day, or an S.L. Allen text, this fits in that as well. So this is a great way to do it. So we're going to have to adjust our schedule on the vocabulary, and I'm very glad, because it's just to your benefit. You know, the more of those that you learn, that's just awesome. And so we'll talk about that in a moment. So vocabulary, the student will pass a vocabulary exam by the end of the semester. So the vocabulary sections that we cover will show up at the end of the semester as an exam separate from your final. All right? And you have to pass that to pass the course. It will not be possible to pass the course without scoring a passing grade on the vocabulary exam. Now, that's just how important vocabulary is. But if you can't score a passing grade on the vocabulary exam, you know, I mean, that's not that hard. I'm not saying you have to get an A or a B. You gotta pass it, right? Hopefully you will get an A or a B, because it will affect your grade, of course, right? But you'll have to keep retaking that exam until you at least get a passing grade to pass the class. Vocabulary is 15% of your grade. Well, for you to say, well, I'll do really well on everything else and I'll blow off the vocabulary exam because it's only 15% of the grade, it's not going to work, right? Because you can't pass the course without passing it. You can take it as many times. I'm not going to be happy if I have to keep rewriting the vocabulary exam in new versions, but you can take it as many times as you need to pass it. You know, I may find ways to make you pay if I have to write too many of those, but I'm sure I won't have to write any but one for any of you. Yep, I mean, seriously. I'm trying to think if I've ever had anybody not pass. Not very many, if any, have not passed that. So it's not that big a deal. And then there'll be a final. Each student will take a final exam during finals week. The exam may cover translation, parsing, and syntax. No late work will be accepted without prior permission, and then only in the case of extenuating circumstance. How do you define extenuating circumstance?
Ruptured appendix.
That would be one. That would be one.
It's hard to use that one.
The way I define extenuating circumstance normally is if it involves insurance, it's probably an extenuating circumstance. So flood insurance, car insurance, life insurance, medical insurance, something like that. And not necessarily for you. I mean, it could be, a loved one, was in a car accident or had surgery, or, your mother's house was broken into or something like that. My dog ate my homework is not covered either by insurance or the seminary. So your translation work, night by night, week by week, will be 30% of your grade. Quizzes will be 25% of your grade. That's basically the vocabulary, and from Wallace, the vocabulary exam will be 15% of your grade, and the final will be 30% of your grade. So since the quizzes cover vocabulary, partly, really the vocabulary is about a third of your grade, the translation is a third, and the final is a third. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, now let's look at the schedule. We are in the middle now of going over the course syllabus in week 1, and we'll cover pages 15 to 40 in Wallace tonight, and then we will work through at least part of Mark chapter 1 and try to apply some of what we learned from Wallace in the book of Mark. So you can see then we have a certain amount to cover each week from Wallace. And we have a chapter from the book of Mark. And then there is designated vocabulary lists from Metzger. So if you use the list from Metzger, did he just copy them for you? Yeah. Okay. Oh, so do you actually have his?
We only went up to
Yeah, we
We
did.
didn't do this.
maybe it was one.
We only started
You started down lower.
That's all right. We started at,
46 to 49.
Is this whole thing you did?
well, I don't think we went to the very end, but we did quite a bit of it.
I'm just going to mark these, and I'll give you this back. But, then we'll know. So what we will do is we will skip. Okay, so you probably, you didn't necessarily cover 26 or 27 times?
What were some of the words?
Now,
Hagiadzo, autophe.
I don't know if I can tell you.
We may have, we look
Let
at
us
it.
look at it and we can probably tell you.
we did from 46 to 49 down to 30 to 40. This is the summary.
Way to go, PJ.
He's got it nailed.
You just don't want to start any further down. And neither do I, thank you. We all owe it.
Yeah, maybe you could just bunch some together, and we could just go through them quick. Like, that way we at least get a little review. I'd like that.
Well, what he would do is he'd have some of the more common words mixed in. Remember, he
Well,
used
his
to have
quizzes were, what, 50 words?
50 words, so you'd have normal, like, more used words and then sprinkle in the new ones, yeah. Or maybe vice versa.
He's using the full entirety of everything.
So we would have got down to 24 times.
Yeah. He's a genius.
So
Why don't we do 2 weeks of this at a time, and then we can spend the last half of the course on a much slower pace down words we haven't seen before.
all right. How many sections are there from 24 times on? Let's see. 1, 2, but they're small sections. 3, 4, 5. Let's do it a different way. How many pages are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 16. Okay, there are 16 pages after 24 times. So that gives us, we'll have to do 3 pages. If we did what you said, after we get down to 24 times, then we'll have to do 3 pages. We'll be at the pace of, to get down to 10, we'll be at the pace of 3 pages per night, per week. What we could do is, well, we don't have to get down to 10 either. What if we covered all of this? What if we did 3? Can you do 3 of these per week? 1, 2, 3.
Up to week 8, yeah.
1, 2, 3. Huh?
Up to week 8.
Yeah.
If we did 3 of these, then by week 5 we'd be on new vocabulary.
Except that we haven't seen any of the words from week 9 or 10 yet. So we have to throw those out and count those as new ones.
Oh, I see what you're saying. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
And you can put 3 weeks together twice, 2 weeks together once. Now it'd cover the first 8, right?
Okay, say it again now.
Week 2, 3, and 4, you can put those together.
Okay.
And then 4, 5, or I mean, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, and 7. You can probably put those 2 chunks together.
Okay.
And then 8 and 9. And then, yeah, 8 and 9, you can start doing new vocabulary however you want. So I don't think we're going to be very sharp with 8, considering those were the last ones we learned. 9, we have never seen those at all, right, DJ?
Okay.
I say do it the way he's got it.
The way he's got it all spelled out.
Absolutely. I could use to review all those others. You guys got them all down?
Do it the way it's really good.
Don't change it? Well, you'll not get as far.
Oh, because you want us to go down to 10.
Well, it'd be nice to, the further down you go, the more it's just going to help you in the future, you know. That's the only thing. And we may not get down to 10, but this, see, this gives us 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. No, let's see, 24 and 25.
I'd be happy getting down to 20.
Yeah, 20 would be really good.
Hey, what was Derek saying? If you get to 20, you can do Hebrews or something like that? Or what was it? He was telling us that 20 was kind of a nice cutoff for the book of Hebrews, I think.
Well, when you get to the book of Hebrews, there are more issues than vocabulary.
Yeah. Well,
But it's helpful to have the vocabulary.
yeah.
Maybe you said most things except Hebrews.
Well, yeah, everything except for if you had down to 20, then vocabulary would not be your big issue. Hebrews would be other things.
And one, usually.
If we did roughly a page of vocabulary per week, which is not that big a deal, really, you could get down to 17 times. If we did this, if we did what's here in 4 weeks, and then we took another 5 weeks and did a page per week, you could get down to 17 times. That's probably a good plan, and that's not doing that much more, really. 24 times down to 17 times.
We stopped at 30.
Hmm?
Is that doing 2, 3, 4, 5 next week, and then 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10, and then extras?
Pardon me?
How do you have your 4 weeks?
Just like you said, I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 and 9, 10 by itself. So that'd take us 4 weeks to do that.
We've never seen week 9 at all.
Yeah, but you see so-and-so, like I said,
No, that's the principal part. That's I haven't talked to you about that yet.
PJ's not looking forward to it.
You want this all for next week? Is that what you're saying? All of this?
No, that's the first 2 weeks.
You're saying do 2, 3, and 4.
Well, yeah, that would be it would be all that plus a
the whole
week.
thing.
Yeah, that's right. If we do that.
You've seen all those before, and those happen 500
You
times.
guys are crazy.
That's actually my
That is a lot. That is a lot.
How many words do you put on one? How do you do are we going to have vocabulary quizzes as we go? It's kind of standard vocabulary quizzes. How many words are on one quiz? Does it?
Oh, it could vary.
Mix it up.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be any more words on one quiz per se. It's just going to be picking from a larger pool, right?
That's right. Look at those words, Joe, and see how many of them you think are unfamiliar to you.
doesn't say there's any that are necessarily unfamiliar.
It's a lot to make sure you know them all. I mean, that's true.
Well, if I went through, you guys did. Yeah, I think I know what I'll do. I think I know what I'll do. What I will do is cover on the vocabulary exam those that you learned from 49 to 30 times last semester. So you're on your own, right? Basically, take those off the schedule, but they'll be on the exam,
They'll be on the final exam.
the final exam, but I won't quiz you on them. And I won't have them on the schedule. You'll just need to know them. Right? Is that fair enough?
Except we wouldn't know those as well as we would the ones at the beginning.
Pardon?
Except we wouldn't know those as well as we would some of the earlier ones. I mean, the earlier ones, the 500, 200, 100, we should have those down pretty cold. Almost rather leave something off at the beginning, keep those in the mix.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I understand. It would be good for us to have some review of those.
Review everything.
Well, maybe we can collapse those 3 weeks into one. And then if we do another couple, that's a good goal to get down to 20 times. So I'll redo the schedule. I will collapse those into 1 week, 6, 7, and 8, because you've already did that. You've already done that last semester, right? So you'll have a week to review those. Is that good? And then that will give us 2 extra weeks to get further, and we should be able to go from 24 times easy to 20 times. Then we'll make it a 20 times. Then we can read the book of Hebrews.
Yeah, I think as long as we know what we need to be ready for.
What are we doing next week?
Next week will be 2 and 3 then.
So next week will be the same. Weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5 will be the same.
Just like it's typed.
Just like it's here. 6, 7, and 8, I'll just collapse that into 1 week, because you've already covered that. Okay? And then that means that week 7 will become week 9, week 8 will become week 10, week 9 will be a new set, and week 10 will be a new set. Week 10 will get us down to 20 times. Is that workable? Which means that, weeks 3 and 4 are going to be probably relatively light. Week 5 is going to be relatively light. So if you start reviewing those that you've already learned ahead, you could even it out a little bit. And that'll get us down to 20. That's a happy thing. That'll be good. At least it's an even. All right, good. I think it would be good in the future. I'll have to chat with whomever, and it would be good in the future to do the first half in that reading class and the next half at least, maybe even more than half in the reading class, who knows, because that's what you're doing, right? Reading and vocabulary. I mean, if that really pounded vocabulary and reading, that'd be a good thing if you even did 2/3 of this in that reading class and a third of it here. That would be useful. Get down to 10, that would be great. Okay, does anybody have a difficulty with that then? So we're sticking with the schedule as it is through week 5. We're compressing 6, 7, and 8, carrying on with week 9 moved up, 10 moved up, and adding 2 more, so we get down to 20. But I'll redo the schedule and give you a revised schedule, so it'll be there in perfection for you. All right, so some of you have noticed some Greek words beginning in week 5, for example. There is ago. You know anything about principal parts? You do, because we talked about it a little bit in beginning Greek at least. Did you talk about it any more in the reading class? So if you took a verb, for example, principal parts have to do with verbs, right? Remember principal parts? The first principal part is the present, future, aorist, so on. Right? There's a principal parts list in Metzger here. So you'll be able to look up ago in Metzger and see that, of course, ago is the present principal part. The future is oxo, which is a little bit different, a little bit irregular. The aorist is agagon, which is irregular. Right? And the perfect is not used in the New Testament, but it would be aka. And the perfect middle is egmai, and the aorist passive is ekthein. So you can see those principal parts of ago. Right?
So you just want us to be able to...
So I want you just to memorize the principal parts of ago. I hope you're encouraged by what I'm going to tell you, but now this is only a 10-week course too. But I like to not survive my syntax class in seminary. It was a whole semester, but we learned so many principal parts, I can't even tell you. Translation, vocabulary, the whole 9 yards. So, I'm trying not to kill you with this stuff, right? So what we're doing is really, over the course of the term, we're only learning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 principal parts. Just so you know what it means to learn a principal part, right? And so you have some of the main ones under your belt. And it just gives you a taste of it. That's just a taste of it, right? So we're not going to go crazy on, 5 or 6 a week kind of thing, right? Just 1 a week, just so you get a taste of it.
Encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Now, one thing I need to let you know, and you might want to mark this down, is that the stuff that's on the schedule, you will be responsible for having dealt with that by the time you get to class. Now, obviously not week 1, you couldn't read Wallace ahead for tonight. But what we do cover tonight, read it before next week, right? And by the time we get to next week, now you should have read all the way up to page 92 in Wallace, right, ahead. So you already read it before we talk about it. And you'll be ready for Mark 8. You'll be ready with that vocabulary for next week. So you'll already have read the text. That's the main thing I want you to get. You'll already have read the text for that night, because you could be quizzed over it, right? So make sure you do that ahead. Now the challenge with teaching syntax and teaching through a text like this is that, it doesn't do me any good to sit up here and read the text to you. I mean, that's, boring. You want to go out and shoot yourself, at the break, if that's the way we're doing it. And you can read, right? But it also is the opposite extreme, just to say, okay, well, read the text, you can get it. So what do I concentrate on? Well, I can concentrate on what I think is important, and I'll do that. But it would also be a huge help if while you're reading through the text, if you will just maybe make notes anyway, but if you will just write questions that you have, circle something. He's going to use big words in here, right? So if there's a word you don't understand, make a note of it and ask. It's better for us to spend some of our time interacting with what you guys aren't getting and aren't understanding from here, than it is just, you know, rehearsing what you've read and what you've understood, and blah, 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 or trying not to fall asleep, you know, that sort of thing. So if there's something here that you really like and you want to bring it up in class, or you disagree with and you want to bring it up in class, or you don't understand, you know, the terminology or, you know, the example or whatever, because there's no way we can cover the whole bit in detail and get through the thing in 10 weeks. So I can go through and pick out the important things, but it's very helpful if I can talk about what you're not catching, and it's hard for me to predict. I try to do that some. It's hard for me to predict what you're struggling with as you read through the text. So please make notes and be ready to ask questions about the text, and that's how I'll know you're really engaged in reading the text and we won't have to quiz too much over it.
When you said before on the translation work, will we be turning in translation work, or do you want to just trust us to work our way through the text? Or
Yeah, it's in some sense it's kind of an honor system that you will work through the text. In another sense, I'm checking because I'm going to be quizzing you on it one way or another, and you know, it might be, you know, read that verse, parse that verb in any of those first 20. Or I might have, you know, a piece of paper that says, you know, parse verse 18, or translate verse 18 and parse the verbals, and you'll spend a few minutes doing that, or whatever. So I'm going to be kind of spot checking you in a sense. But I figure that, you know, it's all for your benefit anyway, and I know you won't, you know, fail to take advantage of that. So, yeah. That's a good question, though, a very good question. Any other questions so we have clarification? Before I forget, let me tell you, I have stuff from last semester for those of you that last time I taught tests and stuff like that, if you guys want to see them in here. We can get that at the break early. No questions? Maybe we can slog through and get done real early tonight, I think. If anybody needs to stop, and I guess I can say use the men's room now in this context. For those watching on the video, there are only men in this room. Then we can stop and do that. Okay, let's look at Walrus for a moment. Mr. Rand! It's all right, good to see you. We're going to review the schedule a little bit on what we had covered. Okay, let's just take a look at our textbook a little bit and see what we have here. We have a book on syntax. What is syntax?
Relationship of words.
All right, the relationship of words. Some people think it's what you have to pay when you buy cigarettes and beer and stuff. This is a different kind of syntax. What Greek words does that come from, syntax? Soon, yeah. Which means what? With or together. And taxis, which means order. So how words are ordered together. So in beginning Greek, we studied morphology. What does that mean? What does the word morphology mean?
How a word changes.
Kind of.
Forms of words.
The form, yeah. We talk, you know, computer programs can morph, right? That means to change the form, but the word means to form. So we're basically studying the forms of the words, and so we concentrated on learning lots of endings and forms and those sorts of things, right? So in beginning Greek, you're always doing all of it, right? You're always doing all of it. But in beginning Greek, you're concentrating on the word and how it's formed. In syntax, you're concentrating on how words come together to form sentences. when you get to exegesis, really, you start concentrating on larger chunks. That is a technical term, by the way, used by linguists that work for Wycliffe, at least, chunks. Paragraphs, for example, right? When you get to exegesis, you're probably working in terms of paragraphs and how they fit into a book and how the book fits into the Bible. But here we're talking about basically sentence structure. All right, so let's take a look at our book and see what we have. So let's look at the table of contents. We have some introductory things, which are interesting, and then we have the syntax of words and phrases. It's broken up into 2 parts, and very reasonably, the first part is the syntax of nouns and nominals, and the second part is the syntax of verbs and verbal. So not surprisingly, when we talk about the syntax of nouns, we are going to major on case usage. And we'll talk about adjectives, pronouns, and prepositions in that same section. When we talk about the syntax of verbs and verbals, we are going to be talking about the uses of tense, voice, and mood. In his order: voice, mood, and tense. Because that's what we look at when we're looking at a verb. We're trying to figure out what the tense is, the voice, the mood, and those are the issues. So this is not surprising that we're going to be looking at. We'll look at the infinitive and the participle under that part as well. And then the syntax of the clause. So we're going to broaden out a little bit, and we're going to look at various clauses and their uses. And when you talk about clauses, you get to talk about conjunctions. Conjunctions, remember what a conjunction is? Remember grammar rock? See that? Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Hooking up words and clauses. Right, so you can talk about conjunctions in relation to clauses. All right. Now, you get to have a cheat sheet in this book on page 323. So let's go immediately now to the cheat sheet, because that's what we'll be most interested in. This cheat sheet doubles as a subject index. So what is this doing for us? Well, he's talking about cases, first of all, like we saw in the table of contents. This is going to be following, of course, the table of contents as we saw. So the first case that he deals with is the nominative case. And the first type of nominative is a subject nominative. Now, this subject nominative is dealt with on pages 29 and 30, as you can see, because this doubles as an index. Now, the second kind of nominative is going to be a predicate nominative, and then there are various kinds of nominatives. And you can see it goes down through the cases, and it goes talks about articles, going to get into the noun, the verbs, and voice, and moods, and tenses, and all of those things. Why is this a cheat sheet? It's a pretty long cheat sheet. It might not be a bad idea for you, and I think I might try this, to get to a photocopier with this text and reduce these. Of course, with our current Bible, you might not have to reduce it at all or too much, but if you could reduce this down a little bit and even figure out a way to do it two-sided would help. But if you could photocopy this, maybe reduce it down a little bit so it'll fit in your Bible, and then staple it together so that you have this index, this cheat sheet, right in your Bible, it would be very useful. Why? Because as we're reading along and we come across a nominative, right? We'll be doing a lot of this in this class, that's the point of it. We will ask, what kind of nominative is that? Now, in the beginning Greek class, we were happy with ourselves just to recognize that it was a nominative, right? But now we're playing with the big boys. We not only have to recognize that it's a nominative, we are going to ask, what kind of nominative is it? Well, not only will we deal with nominatives, but genitives and datives and accusatives, and not just the cases, but we're going to have, what kind of present is it? What kind of aorist is it? What kind of subjunctive is it? What kind of, on and on and on. All of these categories right here, right? Now, you may be able to get all of these categories perfectly in your mind and remember all of them and have them ready for recall at any instant. Otherwise, you can use the cheat sheet, right, and have it in your Bible. So it's very useful if I can say, well, what kind of nominative is it? And you have that in front of you, you look, and begin ruling out, well, it's not the subject, it's not the predicate nominative, there's got to be something else. Now, hopefully, when you see these categories, it will spark in your mind what they mean, right? And you'll understand them. And that's, so we're going through the class and going through the text. The point is that when you see these categories, you'll understand them and know what they mean, right? So if we say, well, that is a nominative in simple apposition, you'll say, yes, I see that. That's interesting, isn't it? Right? If you don't, then you'll know what page to look at. Oh, that's page 33. So we'll go back and review that and see what it is. Right? So having this here is very good, and I think you can photocopy it and have it stuck in your Bible just for quick reference. All right? I'm going to let you read for yourself, and it is very interesting stuff, the preface, and then the language of the New Testament on page 17. Great information there. Basic stuff, but very good information to know. And it's kind of interesting for me as he goes through and talks about the difference between the 5-case and the 8-case system. Of course, he is a proponent of the 5-case system. I'm really comfortable with either one, but I'm most comfortable with an 8-case system. But it's kind of interesting to look at his discussion of that on page 25, and then we'll see it from time to time, I think, as he goes through at least the noun section of the book. Okay, so any questions about the text so far? There is a list of abbreviations, and so you'll find, if you look on page 28, where we're going to start, you will find some interesting symbols. And Mark, if you have any questions, from especially in the beginning there, page 15 on for next time, if you have any questions, we'll entertain them if you'll bring them up next time. This book is a revision and a reduction in size of his earlier work on the same topic, but just very much more expanded than this. So he makes reference to that. And you'll see that on page 29, this EXSYN 38 to 49 is a cross-reference to that work, if you're interested in it. These symbols you see the arrow pointing, and then you also see sometimes a dagger. Can't find one right offhand, but I saw one before. There is a dagger sometimes. If you'll look in the on page 14, actually on page 12 of the text, list of abbreviations. The arrow means common categories that all intermediate Greek students must know. So there's a little hint there, right? And then the dagger, abused categories that intermediate Greek students should be aware of. Abused categories. So in some sense, this is sensitivity training, isn't it? We don't want to see categories abused. All right, stop me for questions if you ever have one. Page 28. We begin with the nominative case. You can see in chart 3 that the nominative of all the case uses occurs 31% of the time. So it is the most frequent of all the cases. The nominative, the accusative, and the genitive are really remarkably similar in their usage, and the dative, as one might expect, is about half, isn't it? The vocative is relatively rare, less than 1%. The nominative case is the naming case. You remember that. So, in one sense, the nominative case is, just kind of the noun, unadulterated, and the other cases are called oblique cases in some grammar because it's adding some sort of significance to the use of the noun. The nominative case is just the noun. There it is, used to name something. Obviously, used most often as the subject of the sentence. So that's our first category, the primary uses of the nominative, the subject of the sentence. Now, we probably don't need to camp on that too much because we kind of understand what the subject of the sentence means. It is the noun that in an action verb sentence is doing the action. Okay? But you also have verbs that are not action verbs. What do you call those? Pardon? No, they're verbs. Huh?
Stative?
Stative, that's right. You could also call them verbs of being. You could call it a copulative verb. You could call it equative verb. What's the main equative verb in Greek? Emi. Right, I am. Also genomai and huparko, and uncommonly there are a couple others that are used in that kind of way. So in those sentences then, the noun in the nominative is the subject of that equative sentence. Of action verbs, by the way, there are a couple of kinds of action verbs. Action verbs that take a direct object, action verbs that do not take a direct object. And there are some verbs that can be either way. What do you call those? Transitive and intransitive. And which is which?
Transitive take a direct object.
That's right. Transitive verbs will take an object, and intransitive verbs do not take an object. There are some verbs you can use either way. Subject nominative. Number 2, next page. Well, if you need some examples for a subject nominative, God loved the world, or Christ was raised from the dead. The next category is the predicate nominative. Now, the predicate nominative is used with verbs of being. So when you have a sentence with a verb of being, particularly Amy, genomai, the subject is in the nominative, and the noun in the predicate is also in the nominative. You can see some examples of this on page 32. The first one from Matthew 3:17. This is the Son, my Son, the beloved Son. This is the Son. This is the predicate nominative. Okay? And the Son, well, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. This is the subject, and the Son is the predicate nominative. All right? So that requires us to ask the question that he asks on the bottom of page 31. How do you distinguish the subject from the predicate nominative in an equative sentence? Right? And he gives us some various rules for doing that. Here's 3. The first one, the subject will be a pronoun, whether stated or implied in the verb. All right, so this is a pronoun, isn't it? So that's going to be the subject of the equative sentence. Now, what does he mean, whether stated or implied in the verb?
So if we've got, yeah, if we've got Eston doesn't have to have a pronoun.
Okay, that's right. You can just have Eston without a subject written out, right? Eston means he, she, or it is. Now, you can write out that he, she, or it, or put a name, or, the book is. You can write it out, but you don't have to write it out. And then it is just, it is, or he is, or she is, right? That's implied by the verb. If it's not written out, it's implied by the verb. If it's stated, the way he's using his language here, then it is written out. So in Matthew 3:17, is the subject implied or stated? Stated. In Acts 2:15, is the subject implied or stated? Implied. Okay, very good. So it is the third hour of the day. And so it is the unstated subject of the sentence. All right? B, the subject will be articular. That means, of course, that it has an article before it. So, pneuma, ha, theos, all of that's in the nominative. And sometimes you may have a sentence without the equative verb stated. That's because pneuma is in a certain position in relationship to ha, theos. Remember that? Okay. What position is pneuma in?
Attributed.
Or the other one? Not attributive. Predicate position. All right. Now what's the rule for determining whether something's in the attributive or predicate position?
If it's attributed, then it doesn't have the article.
Pardon?
Does not have the article.
Okay. Well, the rule, as I like to say it, is if the noun has the article right before it, in other words, if the noun has the article and the modifier doesn't, then it is in the predicate position. All other cases are in the attributive position. All right? Well, pneuma really isn't a modifier, but here is not stated. So which one's going to be the subject? Ha, theos, because it has the article. So God is spirit. All right? Now, if you had an adjective there, good, it would work the same way. God is good. All right? Mark 2:28. Here, the word with the article is son. So the Son of Man is Lord. So the word with the article will be the subject of an equative sentence. All right? If you have a proper name, the proper name will be the subject of the sentence. Jonah became to the Ninevites a sign. It's not a sign became Jonah to the Ninevites. That doesn't mean the same thing, does it? Jonah became a sign to the Ninevites. Elijah was a man. So, in that sense, the narrower reference will be the subject of the sentence. Which is narrower, this or son? This, because the son could be a lot of people, but we're talking about specific. This is the son. And notice son has an article there, doesn't it? And we're going to talk about that in a minute, because you have both a pronoun and an article. So they're competing, aren't they? But again, we want to take the narrower reference. Right? God is spirit, which is narrower there. There's spirit associated with God. There's spirit associated with angels, there's spirit associated with human beings.
What did you say?
Hmm?
Look at it a different way too. You say God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. If you say Spirit, that's narrow.
Yeah, but if are we talking about the Spirit here? So really, God is narrow. God is Spirit. Now that's a little bit difficult concept to get a hold of, the whole narrow reference thing. Well, if you have a proper name, that's pretty narrow, isn't it? Which is narrow, Jonah or sign? Well, Jonah, that's pretty narrow, right? Or Elijah or man. Well, man's a pretty broad reference, isn't it? So Elijah's going to be narrow. So the pecking order. What if both subject and predicate nominative have one of these three tags, which we saw in the first example? Which is the subject and which is the semantic relationship? And what is a semantic relationship? Sorry. First, when both substances bear such grammatical tags, the pecking order is as follows. The pronoun has the greatest priority. Why? Because it's narrower, right? It will be the subject regardless of what grammatical tag the other substantive has. B, the articular noun and proper name seem to have equal priority. It's pretty much the same to say Elijah and the man, isn't it? Because the man is a particular person, just as Elijah is a particular person. So they're about equal in their narrowness. So you have to look at context and decide, and particularly word order in that case. He says something interesting about convertible proposition here in page 33. It says the semantic relationship in such instances is that of a convertible proposition. That is to say, when both substantives meet one of the three qualifications for subject, then they become interchangeable. All right? So look at these examples just above that. My father is the vine dresser. Can you turn that around? Does it mean the same thing to say the vine dresser is my father? See? Now in that sense, the equative verb is really acting truly like an equal sign. Father and vine dresser are equal.
Same person.
Yeah, same person. You could do the same thing where we have this is my beloved son. Both are narrow references, right? You can turn around and say, my beloved son is this one. And that works. But if you took God is spirit and turned that around, does that work? Spirit is God? No, that doesn't work, does it? So in that case, the equative verb isn't exactly like an equal sign. God and spirit are sort of equal. They're not exactly equal. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, one fits into the category of the other, but it's not exactly equal.
So if someone wanted to make it that way, though, if they put the article with pneuma, then it would be equated. I mean, theologically, it's wrong.
Yeah.
But if they put the article with pneuma, and then you've got hatheos.
You could make that grammatical argument. Absolutely. That would create a lot of ambiguity in the text at best, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
To say that
But
this...
what I'm saying is that's how that would become equated. Just theologically,
Yeah.
no, it's not true.
Yes, that's one way you could indicate that. Yeah, that's right. Yep. There is a way to substitute for the predicate nominative, and it's probably best to look at the example here. The two will be literally into one flesh. A's plus the accusative. The two will be into one flesh. And in Acts, the stone, the one that has become unto the chief cornerstone. I mean, it's hard to get it into English, you can see that, but in English we're using a regular predicate nominative, the stone that has become the chief cornerstone. But you can see how we're using preposition ace and an accusative to accomplish that. not all that common in the New Testament. All right, the third category is the nominative in simple apposition. Every case we come to has whatever the case is of apposition. Nominative of apposition, genitive of apposition, dative of apposition, accusative of apposition. Why is that? Because any word can be an apposition to any other word and be in the same case. Right? Now we'll come to a genitive of apposition. You can have a genitive of apposition in apposition to a word of any case. Right? So a word that's in apposition to another, and we'll tell you what apposition means in a minute. A word that's in apposition to another word can either be in the same case as that word, or it can be in the genitive case. So we have, obviously, a nominative of apposition. An apposition basically renames the noun that it's an apposition to. You might look at the term Jesus Christ as Christ being an apposition to Jesus. You might turn that around and see Christ Jesus, and then Jesus would be in apposition to Christ. And whatever case the first is in, the second will be in the same case, and therefore it's an apposition. Usually with something like Jesus Christ, they're going to be in the same case, but it is grammatically conceivable that you would use a genitive for the second one, and then you'd have a genitive of apposition, which can go with the word of any case. Does that make sense? All right, so here in our examples we have John the Baptist came preaching. John is our subject, and it's a nominative. And so now we have ha baptistes, the baptizer, right? The Baptist. That's an apposition to John. It's just renaming John, restating John. The faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead. So the firstborn is the same as the faithful, the witness, right? So firstborn is just restating witness. Okay, nominative of apposition. Those are the three main uses. Now we have grammatically independent uses of the nominative. And as he points out, some grammarians just call these independent nominatives, but he wants us to distinguish between these. And so you have a nominative absolute, and the next one we're going to have is going to be the pendant nominative, and he would like us to distinguish between these two. All right. So in the illustrations, and you'll read the definitions and everything on your own. We don't need to read all of that now. But there is a part in that first paragraph under number 4 that is in italics. It says, a nominative absolute does not occur in a complete sentence, but only in titles, salutations, and other introductory phrases. So here, Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus. So Paul here is a nominative absolute. It's almost like a heading, isn't it? By the way, what use of the nominative is doulos in that example? Nominative of apposition, that's right. The second example, the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now I want to ask you what use of the genitive Jesus Christ is in. I could ask you what use of the genitive Christ is in. What use of the genitive is apposition, right? But what use of the genitive is Jesus, we don't know yet. It's actually an objective genitive, but we'll get there. So that is a nominative absolute. A pendant nominative is one where you can translate, he says, if you look up at the top of page 35, a helpful key to testing whether a certain nominative is pendant is the question, can I translate the nominative at the beginning of the clause with reference to? Okay, so the one overcoming, I will make him a pillar. Now, can you apply that? With reference to the one overcoming, I will make him a pillar. Yeah, so you can apply that. I'm not so sure that in our day-to-day usage of the New Testament, it's that critical for us to be able to distinguish all of these, independent nominative uses. Right? An independent nominative is one that's not grammatically connected to a sentence in a subject, verb, object, or subject, verb, predicate nominative kind of way. If we look at a nominative and say, well, that is an independent nominative, that's probably going to serve our purposes. If you're writing a paper to be published in, Jets or whatever, and you want to be impressive and you want to break the book out and, look at what kind of independent nominative it is and put that in the paper, that'd be a good thing to do. People will think you're smart then, right? But the people out in the pew probably don't care about the difference between a nominative, absolute, and dependent nominative. So don't preach about that. Right? Just because they don't care doesn't mean it isn't important and relevant. But it just, for what purpose are you working, and how thin do you want to slice the hairs, basically? Right? I would like to see an example where this makes a real theological difference. Kind of interesting. Parenthetic nominative is another nominative that's unconnected to the grammatical structure of the sentence. There came a man sent from God, the name to him John, or his name John. His name was John, if you want to put it in good English. You can see how that's also independent, and you could use a parenthesis, so hence the name parenthetic nominative. Nominative for the vocative. Now, you'll see in here when he argues, you'll see that paragraph at the bottom of page 35, number 7, that starts with grammarians, right? Grammarians who hold to the 8-case system typically object to the category nominative for vocative. Well, when I saw that, when I'm reading this and I first saw that category, nominative for vocative, right away I objected to that, because I'm an 8-case guy primarily, right? It doesn't really make too much difference. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit. When we get our whiteboard, next week maybe we'll talk about the whole thing. Is it possible to have a plural noun in the vocative? Yes, right? Men, lend me your ear, right? Now, is there a separate case form for a plural vocative ever? No, right? We learned that in beginning Greek, right? The plural vocative is always identical to the nominative plural. Now, he would call this nominative for the vocative, I guess. Well, to me, that's just, the vocative happens to have the same case ending in the plural as the nominative. Maybe it's because they're a little bit related in concept, vocatives and nominatives. We see independent nominatives here and those sorts of things, right? To make a big deal out of it is really unnecessary. Whether you want to call it a nominative used as a vocative, or whether you want to call it a vocative that looks like a nominative, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, we know the function of the word. It's functioning as a vocative, right? So how we describe it, nobody's going to go hungry over how we describe the grammar. Which brings me to a point that we should make, right? Remember, grammar is descriptive and not prescriptive. You understand what that means? Even English grammars, and students try to use this on their teachers, usage determines grammar, doesn't it? What is accepted grammatically is determined. Well, that's the way I use it. Well, the proper response to that is, well, you're not quite of the caliber to be, determining what our language is going to look like, as a junior high student, right? But general usage of the language is what determines what is proper, even in, I guess there are different ways to look at language, but I think the right way to look at language, even in modern English today, right? And English grammar is going to describe how people use English. And an English grammar for American English is going to be different from an English grammar for British English. And it's kind of interesting because if you talk to someone who is from another part of the world but they know English pretty well, you can tell whether they learn British English or American English just by the way they talk. Like if